If you're at the back, kindly come a bit to the front. Ambassador Frederick Ngoga, the Senior Advisor for International Partnerships, the AU Border Program Regional Security Mechanisms, and the AU Commission, Dr. Vincent Ogutu, the Vice Chancellor, Strathmore University, Dr. Caesar Mwangi, the Executive Dean, Strathmore Business School, Dr. Barak Moluka, a publishing editor and a political commentator, on global affairs, distinguished guests, ladies, gentlemen, welcome to the Creating Safer Space Conference. So my name is Juliet Hinga, and I'll be your MC for the 3-day event. So today's event is basically a culmination of a 4-year journey. So it's the end of project, and it serves as a regional event for Africa and the Middle East. So what this 3-day event will bring is this event will bring together researchers, practitioners, and what they'll do during this 3-day is they'll share research findings, unique research methodologies, and implications of the research findings for violence prevention, protection, and peace-building initiatives. So what we'll do, day 1 and day 2 will feature presentations of the projects, and then day 3 is going to now summarize the main research findings and links to research, policy, and practice. So without further ado, just before we begin, I had given you directions to the washrooms. The washrooms to my left, we have the gents on the ground floor. On the first floor, we have the ladies, and on the second floor, we have the gents again. On the other side, we have the ladies on the ground floor, the gents on the first floor, and another ladies on the second floor. So we'll also have exhibitions outside. So what you'll do is, during our breaks, please walk to the exhibition area and just interact with the exhibitions. And so without further ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Majid Twahir, our Associate Dean at the Business School, for some opening remarks. A round of applause for Dr. Majid.
Thank you very much. I'm a shy academician, so bear with me if I'm not too loud. My Ambassador, Strathmore Leadership, distinguished guests from various institutions, ladies and gentlemen, my role is very simple, is to welcome you to Strathmore. So I take this opportunity to first invite you and to welcome you to this first ever global conference on creating safer space, whose aim is to understand and support unarmed civilian protection and self-protection amidst violent conflict. We at Strathmore are glad to have been part of this 4-year project as the co-investigator and the lead for Africa. We have seen how it has stimulated participatory, innovative, and collaborative research among partners and stakeholders. My role today is to welcome you to Strathmore University. Karibuni. Strathmore has a strong commitment towards sustainable development. Indeed, the theme at the university for last year and this year is sustainability. I'm therefore delighted to inform you that the university is the only academic institution to partner with the Global Partnership and Sustainable Development Data, GPSDD. Strathmore University also set a landmark by being the only university in Africa under the Africa Regional Data Cube to host data for 5 African countries, namely Kenya, Tanzania, Senegal, Ghana, and Sierra Leone. And through the effective use of data for decision-making and telling untold story, we have managed to establish an innovation, development, data, and analytics initiative that focuses on curating new pathways to research and citizen-based data that enables African business communities to harness the data for the benefit of society. I hope the 3-day conference will make a difference to many of you, either physically or online. And once again, welcome to Strathmore. Karibuni, feel at home. Asanteni sana.
Thank you, Dr. Majid. Next, I'd like to invite our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Vincent Ogutu. So a round of applause, Dr. Ogutu. Welcome.
Ambassador Ngoga, the Dean for Strathmore Business School, Dr. Caesar Mwangi, our partners from Aberystwyth and from other partner organizations. I'd like to welcome you all to Strathmore University. I'm actually very thrilled about what you people have been doing for the past 4 years, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what insights you've come up with. What fascinates me is the idea that you don't need to face a gun with a gun, that there are other kinds of soft power that you can use, that you can actually stop a gun with something else, which isn't a gun. Of course, we're all familiar with Gandhi and his idea of stopping the mighty British Empire with all its weaponry just by the sheer force of moral compulsion, just saying, look, we're not facing you with bullets. Justice is on our side. And then he was able to advance that argument and to actually win it. And to think that all this is possible is, for me, something fascinating. I'll share a story with you. Thankfully, in Kenya, we've not had very huge violent conflicts in our history, unlike in other countries. We have had conflict, we have had violence, but thankfully we've been spared the worst of it when I read the news in other places. But the one that was arguably the worst we ever faced was in 2007. After the elections, we have two principals, each of whom is saying, I'm president, you stand down. And the other one saying, no, I won the elections, I'm president, you stand down. And for 2 months, this is just going on. The whole country is paralyzed. And then the conflict escalates and people start killing each other. And about 1,000 people died. And during that time, I remember getting emails from my friends from around the world. The most striking one was from Sweden. So my Swedish friends were saying, it's not safe in Kenya. Just catch the next flight, come and live with us. And I was asking a lot of my friends, many of whom are middle class, and they were actually considering the possibility of leaving Kenya and saying, look, it's not safe, let's just get out of here. Actually, do we ever want to come back? Maybe why did we give up those jobs we had in the West? Let's just give up on this place and move on. And that was the feeling among the middle class. And I remember getting this phone call from a good friend of mine. She's called Laila Macharia. Many of you might know her. And she tells me, well, Vince, you see what's happening to our country? I say, yes. Then she says, are you going to take this sitting down? So I said, well, what can I do? Do you have a plan? And she says, as a matter of fact, I do. Some of us have an idea of how we can get involved in stopping this conflict. We're going to meet at Shelter Freak Saturday, 2 p.m. Come rain, come shine. So just be there. No matter what happens, be there. So I say, okay, fine. I highly respect Laila. And so I show up at this place. And there are about 40 people in the room. It's an auditorium. And they say, in order to start, we want each of you to just stand and for just about 10 seconds tell us who you are and why you're here. And we all start giving these short introductions. And my best was this woman who stands up. She's clearly Asian, and she says, I'm from the Philippines. Clearly I'm not from here, but I'm married to a Kenyan, and we have a daughter who's 1 year old, so she's Kenyan. And why am I here? Because 10 years from now, when she's old enough to ask questions and she says, Mom, when our country was going to the dogs, where were you? I'll say, I was here doing something about it. So we all just got up and gave her, a standing ovation. And every single person who spoke that day was so intense, so committed to their country, and just a different brand of Kenyan, These were people across the tribal divide. So Laila Macharia, if you look at her surname and my surname, Ogutu, we were on opposite sides of the divide in terms of tribal affiliations. And yet she's reaching out to me and saying, let's work together to do something to stop this. And so we started having these meetings. We called ourselves Citizens Pathway. And we formed a committee that reached out to Kofi Annan, who was doing the negotiations, and saying this is what the young, we were in our 40s then, you know, young middle-class professionals are saying. This is how we can get involved. We even had our own little amateur research wing that was asking questions like, how did this conflict happen in the first place? What tribal stereotypes were propagated to make people hate each other so much? And is there such a thing as a good stereotype where we poke fun at each other, but it's all good fun? You know, something like Luos are these intellectuals and they're just pedantic, and then the Kikuyus are just shrewd business people. And those are good stereotypes, nothing harmful in those. But then when you start saying Kikuyus are thieves or Luos are lazy, and now, you know, those are bad stereotypes. So we started discussing how we could use language and rhetoric and swing it in such a way that it's healthy. We started looking at how we could involve artists in expressing some of these ideas. And we still meet till today. In fact, the joke in our group is we are at our best when there's a conflict. That's when we wake up and say, are you going to take this sitting down? What are you going to do about it? And then we all get up and meet and start in. Nowadays, we're so well connected, so we'll say, you talk to so-and-so, you put pressure on so-and-so. Here's a brief you can use to advance this argument. And it's all just peaceful and negotiation, trying to have an impact. We definitely don't have access to guns. We are not using violence as our way of promoting peace or of fighting violence. We're just using other methods. And I'm fascinated that all of you are doing the same and that you've been doing research on this. The other big reason I'm fascinated by this is because we're a university, and universities are supposed to advance knowledge for the benefit of society. So when you do this research, it shouldn't just be to have another publication to advance in your career. I highly doubt any of you are doing it for that. It should be because something you discover might be so powerful that it could actually have an impact and help us solve some of the most intractable problems that we have. I'm glad to see you're studying Palestine. I mean, how are we ever going to disentangle ourselves from that? I mean, this has been going on for decades. Maybe some insight that you get could be the key that turns everything around, because we've tried everything else. And right now they're using the time-old solution of let's just fight each other and whoever wins carries the day. It's just never gonna work unless you actually exterminate one side. Then okay, now there'll be no problem in future. And that's not gonna happen. So as long as both groups are still alive and they're fighting, it's going to go on forever. So I think the key to that is lying somewhere in this room. You people can probably find the answer to that. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about your insights and seeing what you do with those insights. How do we get them out to somewhere where they can have an impact? People could be all-powerful and they just don't know, because they've been led to believe that if someone's pointing a gun at you, you're powerless. And then you come up and you tell them, oh, you do have power of a type you've never even imagined. And here's how it works. Here are the buttons you press. And if you express yourself this way, or if you unite in this particular way, you can actually stop those guns. You actually have that power. They have no idea. But if you show them how that is done, you could actually have an impact. So I'd like to thank you for getting involved in this project. And I'd like to really encourage you to take it all the way. Let it not stop at the publications. Let's follow through. You know, a bit like those who play golf. I don't, but I know there's this idea of, you know, once you've swung the club, it's not over. You've hit the ball. But in order to actually complete this, you have to follow through. The same with basketball. When you're shooting, after you've shot, you sort of follow through. It's all going to help the success of whatever initiatives you come up with. So let's not stop at the deliberations here. Let's follow through. So I'd now like to invite Ambassador Frédéric Ngoga, who has been kind enough to grace the occasion today, in addition to our request to have him on a panel 2 days from now. So you're going to hear a lot more from him 2 days from now. But then today he thought it would be good for him to come, familiarize himself with what's going on here, and encourage you as well, as I have done, and then also officially launch this conference. So we know you're involved in conflict. You've been doing so all the way from working for the Africa Union, being trained by NATO, the UN, the British Defense Forces. I mean, he's got a lot of training in this. Of course, has an MPA as well, so he's studied it from the academic side. But he's the kind of person who gets his hands dirty. I want to do something about it, even if it means leaving my country. He just described to me how he's basically operating between 3 focal countries that he can call home. So he has a complex arrangement, and all this because he believes in fighting conflict. So Ambassador, such a privilege to have you with us, and please join me in welcoming Ambassador Frédéric.
Thank you so much, Vincent. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to say that I'm so privileged to be here to talk to you. When I was given the opportunity to come and talk to you, I said I couldn't miss it. And the reason why I could not miss it is because as Dr. Ogutu was speaking, I was just reflecting on my own life. I come from Burundi, and in Burundi, we are the second country in Africa which has had the most coups d'etats. The first one being Sudan. Sudan has had about 17. Us, we've had about 11. 5 successful ones, 6 unsuccessful ones. And out of the 5, actually, 3 of them happen to have been led by people from my family. So, and my country has been in instability forever and a day. But I also happen to have a wife who's from Rwanda. And we have lived through the tragedies that has happened in Rwanda. And I've also served in Libya, Central African Republic, CAR, Somalia, you name it. I've seen it all. The one thing that I struggle with the most is how much our leaders that we elect, they often puff their chest when their shoes are not tied and want to go to war and choose confrontation. I think sometimes we want to tell them that, you know, choosing dialogue is actually being courageous. Puffing your chest when your economy is not doing well, when your people don't want confrontation, when your people actually are saying to you, look, we want a better life, that's not the way to go. Today, we're facing what we call the crisis of the state on the continent. We have inherited administrations, but we have not inherited states. What does that mean? It means that the state, which is those institutions which are able to deliver services to their citizens, in most of our countries doesn't exist. Go into the borderland areas of some of our countries and you'll see. So the number one challenge for us, I think, will be to recreate the state. State meaning building the institutions, but also nation building. Nation building meaning creating states where there's social cohesion. Because if you don't have nation building and state building, they go together. You cannot have one without the other. Kenya has been privileged, but I would like to tell you that there's not a single country in the world and in our continent which is not vulnerable to conflict. And it can happen in places where you cannot even imagine. Who would have thought, for example, that we'll be seeing military coups coming back again? Yesterday, I was on the phone with some friends of mine. We were talking about the tension which are rising in the Great Lakes region again between DRC, Rwanda, Burundi. Why? It's because we have issues which date from the time when the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi happened, which were never resolved. And the undertone here is a genocidal ideology which exists in the Great Lakes region. Why do you believe that you have to finish off other people for you to exist? It's an ideology that exists there. And unfortunately, it's also an ideology that exists even in the Sahel. The undertone about what's happening in the Sahel that most people don't talk about, yes, there is the crisis of the state, but if you go, and I know that you're looking into this, and you look at some of the people who joined these jihadist organization, you will find that there is a kind of a similarity. They tend to come from one group. Why is that? So there is this idea of discrimination which exists and which leads people to extremes. A couple of years ago, actually not a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, I joined a panel where we developed what we call Principles for Peace. I was with General Romeo Dallaire, who worked in Rwanda, and other politicians from all over the world. And we wanted to develop these principles for peace because we feel that we live in a time where international law is no longer respected, where might makes right, where everybody feels that they can do anything, violate all the rules that you can imagine. But where are the voices of those, the voices of people of reason? Where are they? And in fact, even academia is actually now even getting involved into this mix. You all saw the stories about what's happening in academia at Harvard, Oxford, and all these universities. But I still believe that institutions like Swarthmore, academic institutions, that this is the place where we need to become again the voice of reason. Become the voice of reason, because we're in difficult times. It's not getting any better. Today, as I speak to you, out of the 55 African countries, because in the AU we recognize 55, we have about 20 which are on the agenda of the AU Peace and Security Council. We have about 100 border disputes. We have about 300 secessionist movements. 300 secessionist movements on the continent. And it's not, and these things are coming back again. We also have, unfortunately for us, a race for our minerals on the continent, and it's changing the whole geopolitics, changing a lot of dynamics for us. So how do we get back to international law? How do we really focus on what we need to focus on? I look forward to having a discussion with you in the coming days, but I wanted to just leave you with a few thoughts about the African agenda. We have 4 key agendas on the African continent. The number 1 agenda is peace and security, because we need to silence the guns on this continent. I know you've heard about this over and over again. It's been so far a slogan, because every time we try to intervene in our member states, they invoke sovereignty. People always ask, but what is the AU doing? The AU is at the image of its member states. If I want to intervene in your country and tell you, hey, what you're doing is not right, and that you refuse me that opportunity, what do I do? So our number 1 agenda is peace and security. The second agenda is governance, because the reality is, like I said, we have a crisis of the state, and so long as we continue to have the crisis of the state, do you know when your state is not able to give you what you need in terms of your most basic human needs, what is the fallback position? It's your tribe. Dr. Ogotu was talking about the Luos and the Kalenjins and so on and so forth. That happened, the fallback position was because the state was not able to protect you or to attend to your needs. So what happens is the fallback position is your tribe. Same thing in our countries as well, where we have the Hutus and the Tutsi and so on and so forth. The third agenda item, which is important, but before I get to the third one, I just want to tell you a sob story. When I was in Somalia, we were fighting Al-Shabaab to liberate Mogadishu. And one time I met this old man, and I wanted to ask him about the clan system, because I could not understand it, although it's pretty much linked to our system as well. And then he gave me a quote that I will never forget. He said, if a mountain falls on you, your clan will help lift the mountain off of you. But if your clan falls on you, only Allah can save you. This is how deep that is. And it has stayed with me about this tribalism. But our differences actually can be our strength. When I was a student in the US, I used to, the motto in the US is like, e pluribus unum, which means out of many we are one. So out of our many differences, we can actually build something stronger. Our differences should not be an opportunity to kill each other, but actually to strengthen each other. The third agenda is regional integration. When we talk about regional integration, we're organizing the AU Summit on the 17th and 18th February. And every time that there is the AU summit, I often go into my office and I look at the vehicles of the heads of state coming. And so you see my little country, Burundi, with 12 million inhabitants, 27,000 square kilometers. You see Rwanda, 13 million. You see Eswatini, you see Lesotho, these small countries, and they all have flags. And you look at it and you say, but we don't make sense in fragmentation. We only make sense in unity. The other day, you all saw that the AU got a seat at the G20, right? Okay, you have a seat, but if you don't have a voice, it doesn't make sense. And for you to have a voice at the G20, it's about your economy. If you don't have strong economies, if you don't speak with one voice, you will not make any sense whatsoever. So these countries of ours, for me, I'm an East African, I'm a proud East African, and I love the idea that I can move freely on the continent. But in some African countries, it's very difficult to get a visa, still, today. And so we need regional integration so that we can strengthen ourselves and an economy. And then the other agenda item is what we call voice and representation. 60 years after our independence, we're still fighting for the reform of the UN Security Council. Imagine that for every country on the continent, if you are a Francophone country having a crisis, France is the pen holder. If you are an Anglophone country, the UK is a pen holder, to this day. Yet we have the A3, which is the African 3 in the Security Council. Why is it that we cannot at least co-pen hold on an African issue, or at least submit resolutions of our own? And it just doesn't make sense that 70% of the agenda of the UN Security Council is African, yet we still have this system of pen holdership. So there is a need for us to have a voice, an effective voice, and representation, where we give our common position. But I would like to conclude with one thing. When we talk about Pan-Africanism and so on and so forth, and ending conflicts, the reality is, Sédar Senghor, who was the president of Senegal, he used to say that Pan-Africanism is being anchored in your culture and your identity, but not so that you can also open up to others, right? Pan-Africanism is also about creating bridges with others, because in this world, we all share the human experience. And when I see what is happening in Europe, I was in Europe a couple of days ago, when I see what's happening in the Middle East and elsewhere, at the end of the day, people have the same needs. People need jobs. People need opportunities. People want their voices to be heard. People want to be respected. And sometimes when we have these type of challenges, I think it is important that we go back to the basics, which is to advance the condition of the human being on this earth. I can say more because I'm very passionate about all of this, but I really look forward to sitting there and just chatting. But we are in a times of crisis, and institutions like yours need to be the voice of reason. I often see on social media, and you see what people write, choosing violence over conflict. I've never seen a place where any conflict was resolved by the gun. Believe you me, and I've seen many of it. There is not a single one. All of the conflict end up at the negotiation table. So why kill people? For what? Why waste all these valuable human lives? You see what's happening in Sudan? I can guarantee you the thing will end up at the negotiation table. So why the destruction of infrastructure? All this, why? Anyway, I'm very passionate about this, I'm sorry. It's because I deal with it on a daily basis, and there are certain things which just don't make sense to me. But I look forward to your research, and I look forward to the conversation we'll be having. And on this note, I think I should say that I declare the session open. Thank you so very much.
So thank you so much for very, very impactful words, right? Yeah. So before I let you go, I'd like to invite Dr. Ogutu to give you a small token for accepting to take time and be with us today. So Dr. Ogutu, please. So Christian would like us to do it there. So a round of applause for Ambassador Ngoga. And just before we go to the next session, Dr. Ogutu, we have something small for you. I know you're very busy. You will probably leave us for another meeting. So I'd like to invite Prof. Berit to give Dr. Ogutu a small token. So thank you so much. Now we'd like to go on to our next session, where we'd hear some words from our Executive Dean, Dr. Caesar Mwangi. Dr. Caesar, the floor is yours. A round of applause for him as he comes up.
Thank you very much, Julia. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. Our very honored guests, Ambassador Frederick Ngoga, Dr. Vincent Ogutu, our Vice Chancellor. Thank you so much for those very wonderful remarks. And Ambassador, I must say, it is beautiful when you speak from the heart, because we could feel the pain of fragmentation, the pain of violence, the pain of suffering. We are all connected to each other. And when somebody suffers in Burundi or in Sudan or in Palestine, we suffer. That's a human condition, my dear friends. And I think you conveyed it very well, because that's what makes us human. Without that, then we are like trees. They don't feel for each other, for lack of a better word. We're like stones. We don't feel. And you've heard the phrase, a heart of stone, because you don't feel. And that is not human. So I think we all feel, I think, what you've gone through and what our brothers and sisters. And even as we sit here in this beautiful auditorium and we start this conference, let us remember that at this very time, my dear friends, right now, there are human beings just like us, our brothers and sisters in this continent, who are trying to go to the north to get to the coast of Libya and cross the Mediterranean, as we speak now. And they're there seeking a boat to get out of this continent. It's not tenable. We happen not to be there, but they're there. The question is, do we feel it? And I think this gathering here is about solidarity. We have to enhance solidarity, my dear friends. We have to. Solidarity is a human condition, and I am very grateful to all those who are involved in this network of academics, policymakers, key actors in the sector, journalists and artists, to jointly work to look into enhancing unarmed civilian protection practices, which create a safer space for our fellow human beings. I'm so grateful to all of you. And we are very honored here, Strathmore University, our Vice Chancellor is here, Strathmore Business School, which I am part of, to be hosting you. I'm so grateful to Rosemary, who has been spearheading this From our end here, the Africa Media Hub, I think let's give her a very big clap. So grateful. This is the proverbial stone that is thrown into the still waters that will cause ripples as more and more is done for those silent majority out there who suffer in silence. But for those of us who are privileged, we must do what we can where we are, and that is what this network is doing. It is so beautiful. I won't add anything more, my dear friends. I think the message has been so clear from our speakers, and I wish you all very wonderful deliberations. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Caesar. I think before you leave, we could, you've taken time, you've come to be with us, so the project team would like to give you a token of appreciation as well. And for this, Rosemary, please come up. Dr. Majid, thank you for kicking us off. I have a small token for you as well before we delve into the presentations. Thank you so much. I believe we all feel at home right now, right? After all the great welcoming remarks, you feel at home at Strathmore. And so now I'd like us to go to the next phase, where I'll invite Prof. Berit to just come up and just give us context of what the Creating Safer Space Network is about. So a round of applause for her. Yeah?
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Berit Bliesemann de Guevara. As you can hear from my accent, I'm German, but I work at Aberystwyth University in the UK, where I'm a professor of international politics. If you studied international relations, you might have heard of Aberystwyth. It's very small, it's in Wales, it's on the coast, but it's the mythical birthplace of the discipline of international relations, where the first chair of international relations was founded in 1919 after the First World War, with the aim to help to transcend war. Now, if you look around beyond our centenary, you can see we haven't actually been very successful in doing so. War and violence are still everywhere, and I think one of the reasons why we haven't managed to go beyond violence and war is that our focus has been wrong over these last over 100 years. We have focused on states. But as one ambassador to one diplomat at the United Nations once said to us in a workshop we organized for them to talk about unarmed civilian protection and about the power of nonviolence in New York, she said, actually what I've learned today is that states don't build peace, people do, right? States only exist, borders only exist because people make them such. So it's all about people. So I'm also the principal investigator of the Creating Safer Space International Research Network. And actually the starting point of people is what we've done in this network. It's a network that tries to understand and spread the word about unarmed civilian protection and community self-protection. So people using non-violent means to protect themselves and to protect others from violence and from displacement. We were lucky to get a grant of £2 million for this network, and this network is big. It is not only in Africa, where projects are happening in 4 countries. We also have heard already there are projects in Palestine, we have projects in Colombia, and there are projects also in Southeast Asia. 26 projects in total. We lead this network as a team, with Rosemary being our partner here at Strathmore Business School, with other partners in other parts of the world. So what we've really tried is to create equitable relationships in our working between the UK colleagues involved and between our partners in our projects around the world. And I think more importantly, we have looked at questions of protection not from the level of states, but from the level of communities, from the level of people, and from the bottom up. And I think there are very important lessons policymakers and others can learn here. This has been a 4-year research network, as has already been mentioned, and a lot has happened in those 4 years. Just on a personal level, if you work with so many people, and I'm so glad finally to meet some of you personally and not just on Zoom, but if you work with so many people, I don't know, family members pass away, babies are born, I don't know how many babies we had across the network. Things happen, right? But we started the network when a global pandemic started. We couldn't even travel. We had plans to meet at the outset to actually work together as people, not just as screenshots. But that wasn't possible for the first, let's say, 2.5 years, right? And I know this pandemic has had kind of, for some people, it has been really terrible. It has created or exacerbated poverty and violence in many parts. But as we also just learned, just here in Nairobi National Park, for animals it was actually a good time. Less poaching going on, right? Less killing, because it's very difficult to transport stuff when nobody's allowed to go out. We went through a series of funding cuts from the UK. So we received money from Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK through the Global Challenges Research Fund, and that fund was cut in between. We got our money back, fortunately, but a lot of projects didn't, which has undermined a lot of trust between UK researchers and their partners in low and middle income countries. But we've gone through that and come out of it on the other end. In our partner country, Myanmar, there was a military coup in 2021, right? Very difficult to start any projects in a situation like that. At the same time, we had, on a more hopeful note, in Colombia, a new president who's actually working towards a total peace, who's trying to have negotiations with all armed groups and to bring violence to an end once and forever. Of course, that's a very big task and a very ambitious task, but at least there's some will finally. And as some of you have already mentioned, in the Northern Hemisphere, we've also seen war return, Russia's war in Ukraine, we've seen violence in Gaza, and also in other parts of Palestine. So it's a constant up and down, and if I can kind of, before I kind of cite a dear friend and the founder of Nonviolent Peace Force, Mel Duncan, on this, let's just say, when I wrote the proposal for this network in 2019, the UNHCR was talking about 64 million forcibly displaced people at the time. The last time I looked the numbers up a few weeks ago, it was 108 million forcibly displaced people, so the number is going up. So what Mel tends to say is, like, if you put all the efforts, armed and unarmed, to protect people together, it comes up to about here. But if you think about the need worldwide, it's probably somewhere here. So we really have to kind of all work together to try to think about how people can be protected. So what our projects have shown, I think, is the force of human agency and of civilian agency and of power, civilian power. Civilians are not just victims. Civilians are protectors in their own right. They are creative. They show what solidarity means. And all of this is done from the bottom up through relationships. And they show that violence cycles can be broken to a certain extent through non-violent means. Not in all situations. Non-violence is not perfect, but neither is violence, right? Violence doesn't always get what it wants. So I think focusing on these amazing communities the projects have worked with really gives us hope to think about our relationships with each other differently. I really hope that this conference will not just mark the end of the 4-year funded project, but that it will actually mark the start of new collaborations and new research and a continuation of the work together. And you all have the chance over the next 3 days to get to know each other and hopefully to continue the work. And we'll be working towards that through our activities here. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And I really look forward to our exchanges with each other. As you will have seen on the program, and also as you have come in, there's also a little exhibition out there which we will launch later on, which also showcases a few of the other projects we have in other world regions. And there's also a little brochure that you can flick through, which showcases our projects. It's not the final product yet, because some projects are still analyzing their data and not everything is yet in there, but it gives a very good overview of what we've done. So thank you so much, and I look very much forward to working with you.
Thank you so much for that, Prof. So for the next session, I'd like to invite Prof. Ismail Ataya, a lecturer here at Strathmore University, and he'll be talking about the potential of creating safer space and how that can help communities understand self-protection amidst violent conflict. A round of applause for Prof. Ismail.
Okay, as the Vice Chancellor is leaving, all protocols observed, and thank you very much. I was asked to talk about potential of creating safer spaces. And the first thing I want to start with, you are the right place for this discussion. And I'll take you back to some history about Strathmore so that you can know why I'm saying this is the case. First of all, Strathmore was, back in 1961, was an institution created to serve multiracial communities. We were the first. So we have been involved in issues related to this for a long time. And so part of, if you look at some of our pillars, we have service to the society. And this is very, very important related to that, service to the society. So now, if I take you, just mention part of the history so that you know when we talk about this, we know several things that have happened. Our Vice Chancellor mentioned about 2007, but I would like to mention also that we had one in 1992, which was land clashes. So basically, politically motivated, but land clashes. 1997, it was repeated. 2007, we had political violence. And therefore, we have seen some of these affecting our brothers and sisters in this country. So this is in the right place when you're discussing this. We really feel that this is going to be some of the important things. We are proud that Strathmore is involved because that is, as being one of our pillars, is service to the society. Our motto is ut omnes unum sunt, which means that all must be one. All must be one. So you can see, if we're looking at that, we can be able to relate to this, that we want, despite our differences, despite our different tribes, is it possible for us to work together? And that is one of our pillars. So the next important thing I want to mention, Strathmore, we focus on impactful research. And so when we talk about impact, we don't want, I'm an academician, I don't want and I remember the Vice Chancellor mentioned this about just publications. No, no, no. We should get back to the ground. Is it possible for that research to touch that person on the ground? We use the term Wanjiku, who is that local person who might not even understand all, maybe English, Swahili, or whatever, maybe the local language. Can your research touch that person? Can they feel that your research that you did in the ivory tower, in the conference rooms, in the seminars, you travel different, can they feel that it touches them on the ground? If that happens, then us in Strathmore will be very proud because the research you have done is impactful. Now, I'll pick a few things why I want to mention that direction. But related to that, to have that impact, I hope part of this discussion also talks about communication of that research. Not researchers only. How do you communicate? When I was walking around there, I looked at the illustrations, I saw the diagrams which show a way in which you can communicate to the local person. Two people sitting around a table, an old man, a young man, a lady here, an old mama here, a visitor here, discussing an issue in the local dialect or something that will make them relate and be able to talk to each other. Communication. So academicians will have a way of communicating, but I hope part of this research is going to make sure that communication goes down to the ground so that we have impact. Can it change my mother at home? Can it change my grandmother feeling that something that was happening has really changed me? I feel I am safe, despite the violences that are taking place. So I want to mention a few things which I hope this research, and as part of the way, because you have not written the report, please put this in consideration. One, diversity of perspectives and needs. The ambassador mentioned about different things there, and basically, have you considered those diversity in perspectives and needs? Ideally, sometimes we are so selfish at thinking, this is what must be. This is what I need. Have you thought about the other person? So I hope this research will be able to bring that out so that those diversities in perspectives can be looked at to make sure that things can be resolved and people can live harmoniously. Second thing I'm hoping this research has brought out, there's a range of different individuals and communities. Some are big, in this country we have that, so we find some larger communities, smaller communities, and some there, in fact, one of the smaller ones is about 50,000 people. We are talking about a population of about 50 million, but there are people who are about 50,000 only. Do they feel they're part of the society? Do they feel they're part of the community? Or is it possible for someone maybe just to feel, we can easily wipe them out? No. Have we considered that as part of our heritage? So I'm hoping that part of this research considers this. Then the other one, development of healthier, happier, productive, sustainable communities. Right now, sustainability is a big issue, and we're looking at it in terms of environment. What about our communities? Is it possible for me to proudly tell my grandchild in the future that we have had 52 tribes in Kenya, and I can still mention where they are, understand them, and I explain, and they say, that rich heritage, they are still healthy, they are still living, they feel they're at home in their country? Or is it something that you are just saying, oh, they can be wiped out? No, 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 no. So I hope this also, very importantly, touches on that. Now, safety, physical and psychological safety. Part of the violence that takes place, sometimes it can go psychological. You are in a nice place, but psychologically, you are not safe. You are not in an environment that makes you feel that you are able to do all that you are capable of. So I hope part of this can also have discussions around that, and part of the research will bring out where people can have both physical and psychological safety. Now, the other one is self-expression. Now, if you are, like that illustration I was looking at where people are sitting around a table, is it, sometimes you have, when you have a round table meeting, there are people who might be quiet, and if you don't prompt them to speak, you might not find out their perspective. And when they speak, you realize, we are missing something very, very important. So is it possible in that, as you're bringing the teams together, to be able to say, Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so, this one is a child, so that you can be able to listen to them, they express themselves, to have this total research coming up with those perspectives very clear so that the members can understand. So you can see I'm looking at old and younger because I would like this to be able to get louder and louder to the younger generation who are currently immersed maybe in just social media and whatever. They only get affected when you hear your grandmother, your mother, or your sister, your brother somewhere, something has happened to him or her. That's when they start feeling the pain, and they can't understand. They cannot know where it's coming from. So and then of course, this expression, families, peers, communities, and so forth. So I have a few tips. You are the PI. I have a few tips, and I hope you will put this in place. Make sure the research serves everyone. Engage in active listening as you are going to finalize this, so that you can have these hidden, subtle issues that are there. So when you say you want to solve like the issues that currently we have, the issues in Palestine, what are the subtle issues? If you think about back in what is happening in Sudan, what are the subtle issues? I have friends. I have a friend of mine from, when the ambassador was speaking, I remembered a friend of mine from Rwanda. And if he explains to you some of the things that are happening there, you can really feel it. So, is it possible for you to be able to listen to all the different things? Cultivate a welcoming environment. For people to feel safe, safer spaces, is it welcoming? Or is it that when I don't feel like I want to come in, and that means I'm losing information? Okay, and then of course, addressing community needs. I was happy that you have included artists, because some of the people on the ground understand more when you use illustrations as a way to communicate. So thank you very much for including artists here, and that will widen. So to summarize, if you listen, you have listened to me, it is impactful research. And that's what Strathmore will strive for, ensuring that the research we do is impactful. It touches the person on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ater. Thank you for the tips, the insights, and also the background on Strathmore. So before you take your seat, allow me to appreciate your time. Yeah. And this, Prof. Berid, possibly you could gift. It's a small token to show our appreciation. Thank you so much, Professor Ater. So now we are at 5 minutes to 11, so we are a bit behind schedule. I would propose that we have a cup of tea just out here, and then we can stretch a bit, and then we should be back. 20 minutes should be sufficient, so we come back at 11:20. From there, we'll kick off with a presentation from Gordon and Bernard from Cameroon. Thank you. Tea will be served just out here. Just walk out, and you'll see the setup out there. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Let's settle down. We're ready for this session. We're getting into the presentations now. So, before we kick off, I'd like to invite Dr. Barak Muluka just to give us some few words, yeah, on conflict and, of course, unarmed civilian protection. Welcome, Dr. Barak. A round of applause for Dr. Barak as he comes up.
Thank you very much, Juliet. I adopt the protocols that have been established here this morning and proceed to share a few random thoughts since Juliet did not caution me in good time. Thank you very much for the opportunity to stand before you and share a few reflections. I'm actually myself a student of armed conflict and peace studies, having engaged in the discipline both at master's and doctorate level, and lots of what I think are challenging thoughts and ideas force themselves on our consciousness. My research in this area began soon after the so-called post-election violence of 2007, 2008 in Kenya. And afterwards, I did some work on forced migration and the notion of home and exile, particularly with regard to Southern Sudanese refugees in Kenya. And I've since published my findings in that area. I have listened this morning to very refreshing presentations, and maybe my random thoughts will be basically a very brief appreciation of what we have heard this morning. We heard, for instance, about the year 1919, when the global community, as it knew itself at that time, came together to attempt to end violence and wars across the human community. It was largely an initiative of the then President of the United States of America, Woodrow Wilson, who came up with these famous 14 points for lasting peace, and out of which, as we will know, the League of Nations was born. And after about 20 years of peace, the global community, again as it knew itself, erupted afresh and carried on for 6 years up to 1945, when conflict went into other guises. We have since heard of such notions as the Cold War, as an indication that war can still be there and violence can still be there without people being actively engaged in armed confrontation against one another, that we need to interrogate questions like what are the underlying factors, and as has been suggested by such scholars as John Galton and in our African context, the psychiatrist Frantz Fanon, is it possible that there can be violence and situations that predispose us to physical violence, even in contexts in which we think we are at peace? Why do we have sudden eruptions, sudden breakdown of peace, even among people who have lived together for a very long time? One school of thought will have it that people who have lived together for a long time will not fight or kill each other because they know one another. But other schools of thought and other practical dimensions have taught us that in fact people are more likely to fight when they have lived together and they know one another, at least in